All right, so I don't know if any of you are actually familiar with this device. It's actually been on the market for about 18 months. And what it is essentially is a wearable device that allows you to create text and control any digital device that accepts Bluetooth just by touching your fingers on any surface. This is a fairly radical technology from a interaction and an input standpoint. And I'm going to try to give you a feel for how it works, how it can be helpful for various, populations. Might be good to just kind of take a step back and explain sort of where this came from and why this exists. But I guess before I do that, let me see if I can get my video going so that I can actually show it to you in action, because that'll give you a better idea about what we're gonna be talking about. All right, great. So hi everybody.
Hi.
So I'm wearing this device here. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my So I assume you can all see and still hear me, hopefully. So I'm wearing a tap device. I'm actually wearing it on my right hand. And it consists of these 5 rings. They're connected by little bungee cords. And they have sensors in them which allow me to, allows the device to know what your fingertips are doing. So, so this can be used for a variety of things. And I'm going to just show you how it operates as a keyboard. One of the things about it is that it's a pretty generic technology from a input standpoint. So in other words, it's a Bluetooth keyboard to the outside world. All right, so this is paired to my tablet, and hopefully you can see both my hand and the tablet. So I'm going to say this is a demo of app. So what I'm doing here is I'm touching this table, and each time I touch, it's kind of like playing a chord on a piano. In fact, this is called a chorded keyboard. I'll put it back up here. And so just like when you play piano, your fingers, shape a certain chord, and that will play a certain note or a certain tone. Here, each set of fingers that you touch will create a certain letter of the alphabet. And I'll go into how this works and how it's learned and so on and so forth. So as I said, it's a Bluetooth device, and it emulates a keyboard, as I've just shown you. So so before I actually talk about this, and this slide is going to explain how you actually acquire the skill of doing this, I want to explain a little bit about sort of why this is and kind of who we are and why we're doing this. So I'm an electrical engineer, and I've worked for the last 27 years or so as an inventor and an entrepreneur. And I've started a number of companies. My previous company, I invented the first digital instant system for dentists to take X-rays. And so this is back in the 1990s. I'm kind of a over-the-hill inventor, as you would, but back then, it was all done with film, and if you went to the dentist's office, they'd put a film in your mouth and give you a relatively high dose of radiation, and then they have to go develop it, and all you'd have is a really tiny film to see what the diagnosis was. And I just developed a digital way of doing it, which was instant, used about 1/10 of the radiation, and gave you an instant result that you could display on a computer and be able to see things a little bit better. So I had actually sold that company in 2005, and I had a very pleasant retirement for a while. And then, some years later, my kids sort of, grew up and moved out of the house, and I ended up with too much time on my hands. And this was coincident with when the first really wearable screens were coming out. By wearable screens, I mean like smartwatches and things like Google Glass which allowed you to see things, but did not have a natural keyboard. And I became very interested in the problem of how we were going to interact with these technologies as they became more popular and we relied on them more to do more of our computing work without a keyboard. So of course there's voice and there are other kind of gesture systems, but they all have their limitations and can't be used in many of the environments that we'd want to use them. So I developed a couple of different ideas, and tapping came out of sort of a thought experiment in which, just sort of imagined if you actually had to rely on, let's say, a wearable screen to do some serious computing work, what would you like to do? And I tried a lot of different things, and tapping is a fairly natural motion. And as I'll explain, it can be done extremely quickly and it's very learnable. It's like a very human thing, and it's very, very comfortable to do it. Nobody has to kind of learn, a new motion to just tap on an object. So the more I developed it, the more excited I became about it, because it just became clear to me. And if any of you ever get a chance to try it, you'll see that when you try it, it really does feel like the way that we should be inputting into our devices, or at least should in the future. And I really do believe that it's an exciting technology which will have an important place in machine interaction or digital interaction in the future. And so that was enough to kind of get me out of retirement and motivate me to do this. But when I started it, I really didn't know anything about the AT market at all. It happens that my wife has a very close friend. She actually was part of a very close-knit mommy and me group when her first daughter was born, which was 26 years ago. And one of the girls in this group is blind. And we've been lifelong friends with her and very close friends with her family. And she's an incredible woman. And she skis, and she's in law school now, and she's just an amazing woman. And so they were over here when we were just beginning to kind of crystallize the idea. I should explain that my wife is a very, very prominent inventor in her own right. She's Sabrina Kemeny, and she's my co-founder and president, and she is the co-developer of the technology that's inside every one of your cell phone cameras. She developed the active pixel CMOS image sensor. It's kind of a long name for a very special technology, but it's what enables low cost and low power and tiny cameras of very high quality. So she's a very accomplished inventor in her own right. And we were talking to Kira, and she was she said to us, there would be some really interesting uses here for blind people and for AT. And that started us down a trajectory of exploring how to make this technology inclusive and how to see, whether it really could be applicable to people who might use it. So that's kind of the background of this. And I'll explain a little bit more about it as I go on. But let me just take this one step at a time. So in order to I will try to put some caveats in here as I go. You need to learn skill set, and this is how to tap the alphabet. Now, it turns out that it's a very, very simple process, and we have some very powerful apps that gamify it and make it very, very quick and easy. We developed them actually with a cognitive learning group at Stanford University, and it's a very clever and actually very enjoyable game. But bottom line is that you can learn the entire thing in about 2 hours. That's to learn the alphabet, and then to develop the muscle memory, or what the scientists call habit-formed memory, takes another, let's say, 3 to 5 hours before you're as proficient as you would be with a standard keyboard. So it's pretty quick, and I'll just say we have several apps that do this. One is just focused on cognitive learning. One is just focused on habit-formed memory. That's Tap Academy, and one of them is specifically tailored for people who have visual disabilities and cannot see a mobile screen well enough to be able to utilize it. And it's so easy to learn because unlike a keyboard, there is no spatial information that you need to memorize. So all you need to do is know which fingers have to touch, and you can actually group those in very logical ways. So there's actually only 8 groups of taps that you have to learn in order to do this. And for the same reason, it's extremely fast. So, all you need to do is a little up and down motion. You don't need to move laterally at all. Your fingers don't have to kind of extend or stretch. And because of that, even with one hand, we have users who are now tapping at speeds of more than 70 words per minute. It's a very easy to learn, and it's quite enjoyable as well, and you can do it quite quickly. Okay, and just some overview about what the product is. So it's as I said, it's this series of rings. It's actually very comfortable, and they're quite adjustable. So there's only 2 sizes, and those 2 sizes span everything from children of about 7 or 8 years old, and let's say that's the small size, goes to people with medium-sized hands, and then from medium-sized hands to very, very large hands is the large size, and they're adjustable with little bungees that both extend and compress the rings. They're split rings, so basically, if we get more into this, you can learn more about how to adjust them. The battery lasts for 8 hours, and then it comes in this charging case, which actually has a built-in battery, so you just charge it by putting it in the case. It's compatible with anything with Bluetooth, which basically is any mobile device, any laptop, and most of the desktop systems that people use. And a bunch of other, kind of wacko devices like smart TVs and virtual reality systems and things like that. And it's programmable. I'll go back to this a little bit because it's important from an AT standpoint. So what that means is that you can actually repurpose these different chords, these different taps, for things that you want to do. And it's just an interactive tool that we have. It's very easy to do. The retail price for this is $199. It comes with a 1-year warranty. All right, so the way the company is organized is essentially around 3 market segments. And I'm just giving you this information so you can kind of get a better feel for, sort of who we are and what we're trying to do. But, the first segment is consumer and ergonomics. So this is the biggest part of our market. And these are people who are using it just as a keyboard, for various applications, either because it's more mobile, it's more comfortable, it can help you avoid posture problems and RSI problems, et cetera, et cetera. So that's still our biggest segment. The second segment is virtual and augmented reality. As you can imagine, if you're wearing your display, again, you don't really want to carry your keyboard. And this also crosses over to enterprise. So there's a lot of businesses that are using it in this segment as well, and that's a pretty fast-growing segment for us. And then finally, and I'll elaborate on this quite a bit, accessibility. So this device is inherently vision-free. It's a tactile system. You always know what your fingertips are doing, and it can be done with one hand, and it doesn't require any lateral motion. So this makes it an alternative, and I'm going to kind of encourage you to think of it that way. I mean, whatever it is or isn't, it's just an alternative. And so for people who have difficulty using a standard keyboard, it's just another alternative that may or may not be suitable and helpful for a certain individual. Okay, so the biggest segment for us so far in the AT market are people who have visual disabilities, and as I said, this is where they don't have a tactile. So the most common use among the blind and low vision population is when they're mobile. So when they're at their desk, they have a tactile key, a physical keyboard, right? And they generally can do fine. But if they're using a mobile device, then they are limited to the on-screen methods for entering text and information and navigating, and that generally slows them down quite a bit. So tap is an alternative that can accelerate that process and make it a little bit faster. In addition, we have a library of taps that mimic the voice over commands that Apple has developed for iOS. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with VoiceOver, but it's a screen reader, but also a screen control methodology where you can basically do anything just with certain screen gestures, even if you can't see what you're doing. And it's very, very powerful. Problem is, though, that you have to hold your phone in one hand and do the gestures with the other. And if you're blind, you generally need your hands, especially when you're, on the go. And this allows you to not have to hold your phone. It can actually just be in your pocket, and you can do all of the same things of navigating to an application, opening it up, and manipulating it, and then and you can do all of this just by tapping your fingers. So that's another reason why it's popular among that population. All right, so beyond, and when we started selling this, and it's been on the market now for about 18 months. So when we started selling it, we really weren't aware of all of the applications in AT, and we still are not. And people are proposing new use cases, and it's being evaluated, and we're certainly very interested in learning. Like just last week, Elizabeth and I were in Connecticut addressing a fairly large group of professionals, and they had ideas that that hadn't occurred to either of us. So this is a learning process for everybody. So as I said, it's a solution where an alternative, where a standard keyboard is not ideal for that particular individual. And this can be people who can only keyboard with one hand, or have spinal instabilities, or have mobility issues which prevent them from freely moving their hand. So there's a lot of other use cases like this. I will say the following as an important caveat, which I'm sure all of you are thinking, which is that in order to use it as a full-blown keyboard, to be able to do the entire alphabet and replace, let's say on-screen keyboard or physical keyboard, the user does need to have a certain amount of cognitive ability. So the learning curves that I put up, are based on quite a large population size, but it does depend on the cognitive ability of the user. So it's something just to realize. Okay, so some people are using it as a full-blown keyboard for AT, particularly with blind people or with one-handed use. However, what we're finding now is that it's being used also as a controller. So let's say somebody cannot memorize the entire tap alphabet. This can still be interesting because it's a wearable device that can essentially be programmed to control switches, as Bluetooth switches. So whatever the ability of the individual is, you can customize it so that you can trigger and activate whatever switches you want. Let's say somebody can only tap, let's say their thumb, and then the other part of their hand, as an example. Well, you could then give them two switches, and it's a wearable. So, they don't have to sort of aim for where the switch is. You can give them a surface, and that can be helpful for certain population groups as well. And there's a lot of other things that people are beginning to work with it. So for example, as a communication tool, and this is the last example that I'll give, and then that'll open up for questions. So people are using it for communications, either as like a speech-driven AAC system, or just in terms of text, so that if you program just 5 finger taps, and one of them says water, and one of them says food, and so forth, you can allow somebody to communicate just by tapping their fingers in that manner, because you can program this also to trigger macros, and strings and things like that. So that's another thing that people are beginning to work with. I guess I will say, we do consider ourselves kind of newcomers in this market, and we don't have a lot of highly developed case studies and things like that. It's something that we're working on with the various groups that are trying it. So we are extremely interested in working with you guys and really with the community in general in terms of seeing what works and trying to see what we can do to to really just help people who could benefit from this. So that's it for. One thing I forgot to say is that it also has a mouse. So it has a mouse built into the corner. This isn't necessarily that applicable for AT, but essentially when you put your hand down, it turns into a mouse, and you just slide your hand around to control the mouse. When you pick it up, it turns back into a keyboard. And there's many other little factoids that I guess I won't try to cover. So let me just open that up to questions and see if there's any other information that I can provide.
Hi, this is Joe from San Jose. Could you talk about the keyboard again a little bit? How you customize or how the keyboard's different than a regular QWERTY keyboard?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is to forget everything that you know about a keyboard. And we almost hate calling it a keyboard because there's no keys and there's no board, but it can accomplish the same thing that a keyboard can. It works on the principle of forming chords with your fingers. And what I can do actually is just share my screen again and just show you a little bit. So, okay, so all right, so let me just show you a couple of things. So going back to that Word document. Yeah, so I don't know if you'll be able to see what I'm writing so much, but so when I say chords, it means that I select 1, 2, 3, or 4 fingers of a certain kind to form a letter. So, for example, the vowels are, A is always my thumb, regardless of where I touch. It's always printing A. I don't know if you can see, but it's printing A. And perhaps this isn't working, so I'll just explain it verbally. So in order to, let's say, print A, I would just touch my thumb to something and can touch it to my arm or my table or really anything. That's an example of a 1-finger tap. An example of 2-finger tap would be, let's say, T. The letter T is my index and middle fingers, and I just touch that to anything, and that would form the letter T, and so on and so forth. So that's how the alphabet is formed. Did that make sense? That explanation?
Basically, it's the number of taps that designate the number of taps in the sequence, and which fingers is what determines the letter, right?
No, there's no number of taps. In other words, you only tap once for each letter. It happens that with 5 fingers, there's actually 31 unique taps that you can do. So it's only 1 tap to do a letter. There are multiple taps if you want to do punctuation, special functions, and all kinds of things like that. But just to do the alphabet, it's just 1 tap, and all you need to know is which fingers you actually have to make contact with when you're trying to type that letter.
Well, you only have 5 fingers, and you're going to need to have multiple taps in order for you to make more than 5 letters.
Right, but that's not really the way it works. Because you can actually touch more than 1 finger at a time, right? So let's say, yes, you have only 5. If you were only going to touch 1 finger at a time, then you can only do 5 letters. But if you can touch 2 fingers at a time, or 3 fingers at a time, or 4 fingers at a time, then you have like I'm saying, like let's say if you want to type the letter T, you actually touch 2 fingers simultaneously, the index and middle fingers.
David, it's Elizabeth. Can I jump in here?
Sure, please.
I'm not the techie or the genius that I'm like a normal person. And what is really great about this is you can't really see it right now, but there are these terrific gaming apps. And the first one is called Tap Genius. So when you go on Tap Genius, it shows you A-E-I-O-U, and then it throws back at you an A, drop an A, and then you hit your thumb, and then it hits then an E, and you hit your index finger, and an I, and you hit your middle finger, and so on. And then so you practice that for a while, and then you get through that, and then the next one comes up, and it teaches you the most common consonants, which are N, T, L, S. And N is your thumb and index finger tapped together. T is what he said, the index and the middle finger. L is the middle finger and the fourth finger, and S is the fourth finger and the fifth finger, and so on. And you get to play as you learn it. And I went from, the muscle part, 2 hours and so on, and I kept growing so that I have some cognitive ability at this point. Then when you finished going through all those groups of letters, you go to the next game, which is called Tap Academy. And then you start to improve your speed, ironically, by learning how to slow down. And then you just really get better and better at it. And so it's a kind of a brilliant system for learning. And if you had it in your hands right now, you would catch on really quickly to certainly the first vowels.
Thank you. This is Megan. We have a few questions in the chat that I'm going to start reading. We have one from Antonio who wants to know if it's compatible with Samsung and other Android devices, or is it just with iOS?
It's compatible with anything that has Bluetooth, which includes, Android devices, iOS devices, OS X devices, Windows devices, etc. The learning systems are available both for Android and iOS.
Great, thank you. And our next one comes from Vincent. He wants to know if you have heard of anybody getting this covered by insurance or the Department of Rehabilitation.
No, I actually have not. And as I mentioned, we're sort of early in on this, but we would love to know how to do that, how to get that to happen. I don't know of anybody who has.
Great, thank you. And then Vincent also asked, have you tried this on new learners who don't have any keyboard experience, perhaps kids?
Yeah, kids love this. That's a great question. Kids, take this very quickly and learn it very quickly and get very dexterous at it very quickly. So that is a interesting group for us. We're actually working with the New York City Department of Education. Elizabeth's actually very close with them. We're working both in their special ed department and also a little bit now in classroom. So yeah, that's an interesting group for us. And I guess I would say, we recommend it really for kids who are 8 years old and up. Less than that, they don't really have the fine motor to do this that accurately.
Great, and we have a few more minutes left. So if anybody has questions, please send them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. We have a question from Marisol who says, we want to get one for our library, their device lending library. The criteria is that we have to have 2 vendors to put on our purchase list. Can we still get it if it only has 1 vendor? So you guys are the only people making this product. It sounds like that's her question.
Yes, we're the only one who make it. And what people have done is, I don't know if this works, but you can sort of price it through Amazon or through our direct portal. I actually don't know all the criteria that you have to meet, so it's hard for me to say. Or people, I think maybe this is a good thing for Elizabeth to help you with offline.
Yeah, and with the New York City Department of Education, it's a grand bureaucracy, and they let you come in as a sole vendor. I don't know what California does, but I'll be happy to follow up on that. So you need 2 bids in California, that's correct? Marisol?
This is Megan. It sounds like, yes, that is what we need,
Okay.
but we'll follow up on it.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Great. And Dovid, we have a few people asking if they can see the device again. Would you mind screen sharing and maybe doing a closer up with your hands?
I also want to just say to everybody that there are beautiful videos on the website, which is tapwithus.com, and it will answer a lot of your visual questions.
Okay, so let me start like this. The device, when it's not being worn, consists of these 5 rings, and I've opened them so that they're kind of wide open. Then to put it on, you slip it onto your fingertips. And then to wear it properly, you then want to push it up so that it's all the way up where you would wear a ring, okay? Once it's in place, you tighten it just by adjusting the bungees on the bottom. So that's what I'm doing right now. And you basically sort of pinch them so that the rings close. You turn it on with the button in the on-off switch. In the thumb. And I'll just kind of show you if you can see it. There's a little protrusion in the thumb. That's the mouse. So to mouse, as I said, kind of just put your hand down, and it's a little bit like holding an invisible mouse when you pick it up. It's a keyboard. And I see that, you know, Microsoft Word just crashed, but I've adjusted the fonts in my notes, so maybe I can actually show you this. So, let's see. I understand it's a little bit difficult to grasp what this is, so hopefully you can see this. So as I was saying, like a one finger tap, like, you know, to do A is just my thumb. And in fact, the vowels are, you know, one finger taps, A, E, I, O, U, just going sequentially from my thumb through my pinky. But then there are two finger taps. So T, for example, are these two fingers touching anywhere. Well, that's always going to be T, no matter where I type. Okay. And then there are three finger taps. So, you know, this is always going to be the letter F, these three fingers. And then I can, you know, I can also do numbers, I can do directional keys, I can do hotkeys, for example, if I want to go to the home screen, I can do that. And it's you know, basically anything that you can do with a keyboard, you can do with this. And then again, if you're going to work with people directly, I'll just, you know, take it off. First, you know, loosely, either by putting it in the middle of the bungees, open, and then you slide it off. So that's the more full demo. Thanks for asking that question.